Coming up on Plane Crazy Down Under, we're joined by flight instructors and filmmakers Stephen Limkin and Erin Douglas, promoting the new documentary series, Touch the Sky.
He had this idea that was going to follow one of the participants, and after some conversation, we decided that it actually was going to be better if we told more stories rather than just one story.
Recreational aviation, I think it's brilliant. I think it brings back such a fun vibe. I just love it for the fun of it.
And a little closer to the ground, drone racing army style. Yep, it's a thing.
All the kids love watching the action. They love watching the pilots rebuilding their aeroplanes. They love watching the crashes. And so we went bigger this time.
It's all about inspiring people to flight as we get plane crazy.
Well, hi everybody and welcome back to the show. It's great to have you with us as we talk aviation once again. I'm Steve Vischer and with me, of course, is my good friend Grant McHerron. Mate, we're off to the movies this week in a manner of speaking.
I know, and it's for a very important cause. This movie is a documentary to help get more women aware of a life in aviation, get more ladies in aviation. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, it certainly is. And, of course, we're talking about Touch the Sky, a new documentary series, which you can find at touchthesky.au. The director of Touch the Sky is Stephen Limkin, and we're joined also by Erin Douglas. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stephen, congratulations on the documentary series. I've really enjoyed watching the clips that have come out so far. You must be really pleased with the way it's been received.
Oh, absolutely. The feedback has been overwhelmingly supportive for each of the episodes that have already gone to air.
Now, tell us a bit about the background. What led you to start creating this documentary, highlighting, of course, women getting into aviation? That's obviously the focus of this series.
Yeah, so a friend of mine, Michael Monk, the CEO of Locker.aero, so he came to me with an idea to sort of like try and shift the numbers in aviation because we knew that the numbers were very skewed, male skewed in terms of participation. So he had this idea for this documentary project that was going to follow one of the participants. And after some conversation, we decided that it actually was going to be better if we told more stories rather than just one story. And so that's how Touch the Sky came about.
Storytelling is really where it's all about, isn't it? I mean, you can get out and you can have all these narratives going, but in the end, if you do a series the way you've done it and just tell people stories, that I think that has the greatest cut through.
Absolutely. And our producer, Bridget May, has really guided that process from the moment we finished shooting all of the content to the time we got into the edit studio and started to develop the scripts and each of the episodes. And she's been absolutely instrumental in ensuring that each of these stories is told in the best way possible.
Well, Erin, we're concentrating on your story today, and I just want to play you a quick grab from the documentary series.
All I remember is being scared of flying. That's all I remember. It started on a plane, and I just remember feeling terrified of the bumps. It got worse and worse and worse as I got older. It just, I could never logic my way out of it. It just got worse.
Now, I'll tell you what, Erin, I bet you found that's a far more common story than you ever thought.
It is actually. Yeah, it wasn't until I started building an online community that I realized how many people suffered with the same fear and phobia that I did. So, I mean, it made me feel less lonely.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I can identify with you. I never actually flew anything until I was 17, and I remember my father back in the 1970s used to go flying with a great friend of his at Moorabbin Airport, and they would always invite me along as I was a kid, and I was terrified. I never went. And the first flight I did was going overseas in a 747, and the second we went into the sky, I've told this story to our listeners a lot, so I hope they're not yawning, but I just fell in love with it. And I wonder, when you did get in the cockpit and you started flying, how was it for you? Was it an instant overcoming of that fear, or was it a more gradual thing?
Definitely a more gradual thing. I didn't instantly fall in love with it. It's something that I had to consciously decide, yes, this is what I want to continuing to do to get over that fear. And I still experience it to this day in various capacities. I think what started as a fear of turbulence developed into other fears, a fear of falling. I kind of exhausted all the fears and yeah, so it's still something that I do deal with today. It's a real process. I feel like it'll be a lifelong exercise.
Yeah, because you're definitely not the only one. I know, like I fly hot air balloons. I've got my butt on the side of the basket where there's about 5,000 feet between me and the ground. And yeah, I always have a hand on the burner frame or on a tank because I hate going up ladders. I have a fear of heights, and flying an aircraft, okay, you're sitting in there. The more the visibility, yeah, okay. But the hot air balloon, as long as I'm anchored somewhere, I'm fine and I'm focusing on flying. Do you have that fear of heights thing?
I never had a fear of heights. I think that's the only thing I didn't have a fear of. I think for me, mostly it's the sensation of falling and the idea of falling from a height.
Have you tried skydiving?
I have never, and I will never try skydiving.
I say the same thing about hot air ballooning every time Grant suggests that to me, just quietly.
Yeah, I do have a couple of friends who are like, never, ever, ever will we get in a hot air balloon, and especially not with you. Thanks.
Do you find, Erin, that through your flight training, I mean, I think something that really spoke to me was learning, about the physics of it and how aircraft operate, and through that understanding, it kind of it helped me to get through that process a bit.
Yeah, definitely for me, the more I learned, the less I feared it. But it's also to do with me being in control. I can still sit in the back of a large airliner and I'm still, terrified because there's a barrier between me and the cockpit. So I'm not in control. I think mostly for me, it's a control thing.
I think getting closer to the front helps, especially if you're in the places where you have lie flat beds, nice alcohol, food and all that. That really helps for me, I can assure you. I may not be in the very front with the best view, but it's pretty good.
I'll keep that in mind.
Stephen, with your documentary making, would it be fair to say now that you're a filmmaker with an aviation habit or somebody who's in aviation with a filming habit? Either way, it seems to work really well.
Yeah, I've done a few projects now, particularly in the aviation space, and I feel like in terms of aviation, I've found my tribe, and so I've married my skill and experience as a documentary storyteller with my passion for aviation. And I really, really love telling aviation stories.
Because Touch the Sky is not the only aviation story you've told.
That's correct. So I just finished doing a 3-part series on loss of control with Recreational Aviation Australia, which is out in the wild. And then before that, we did The Aviator, which is all about Bob Tate, OAM. Who we happen to work out of his hangar in Redcliffe. And so I get to spend time with Bob every day, and I absolutely love being in his company. And then before that, I made a 22-part series about learning to fly planes, which sort of followed my experience of learning to fly and overcoming my fear of flying.
And for those of you who aren't in Australian aviation, Bob Tate is sort of right up there with the Kings and people like that in the US, has written most of the books that Australian pilots have learnt from, training guides, methodologies, all that kind of stuff. Complete legend, and the OAM represents Order of Australia. So, yeah, right up there. If the Kings are legends in the US, Bob Tate is just synonymous with GA learning and RA learning here in Australia.
Yeah, so it's certainly a really good story to tell. Erin, let's talk a bit about going on. You've learned to fly, and it's actually a really good news story about, conquering those fears of flying, and you've gone on actually to be quite involved in a flying school.
Yeah, I have. I was lucky,
Well, that's the best news story ever.
It's, I know. It's also the best job in the world. I mean, when I first started, I would never have imagined that I would be at this point where I was actually in a career and teaching others. The best I hoped for was just to get rid of my fear. So to now be in this position and to kind of fall into a passion that I didn't know that I would have, I feel particularly lucky.
How do you find the instructing, the ab initio through to the more advanced? How do you find the art of teaching people to fly?
Difficult, because I wouldn't consider myself to be a born teacher. So teaching was something I also had to learn. None of this came naturally to me. So I'm still kind of in the early days of it, and so finding my stride in instructing. But I think with each hour that goes on, I'm learning my own style. And yeah, it's just, the whole thing is just a process, and I'm loving it.
And Stephen, you're an instructor as well, yes?
I am, yes. And I've actually had the privilege of watching Erin from the moment that she did her first board brief when she was doing her rating, all the way through to seeing her get a senior instructor upgrade with Recreational Aviation Australia. And I've watched her journey. And so she has just gone from strength to strength. And there's been some lows and some things for her to overcome, but she's doing such a good job.
And it's interesting too, because I notice in the documentary that focuses on you, Erin, there's actually some grabs from some of those training sessions where you're actually having to present that brief. That's now, in my day job, I do that in a different industry, and that can be quite challenging to do one-on-one.
Yeah, it was daunting. For someone like me that suffers awfully with anxiety, imposter syndrome, a lot of us suffer from those things. It was, I feel like I was being laid bare. At a lot of points, I couldn't speak at all. I couldn't even get started. So to go from that point to where I am now, where I can do it semi-comfortably, wow, like for me, that's such a personal success.
Major success. I've recently started as an instructor in ballooning and only had a couple of instructional flights that I've given to others. And having done fixed wing and gone through the instructional process there, it's quite fascinating to see the very much more relaxed and different style that we have for balloons and the chats we have. But the core concepts are there, and the getting it through and making sure you're on following a syllabus and everything. But I haven't used a whiteboard yet.
Oh, you're lucky.
Certainly in terms of mentoring, you can talk about mentoring through aviation, but also what you're talking about there is a skill in public speaking and presenting. And I suppose part of the crew here of Touch the Sky documentary, you've got some people who are very au fait with that, and particularly Katrina Roundtree. I would assume now, I've produced some other podcasts with Katrina in it. She's very, very comfortable doing that, and I imagine she's been a great help to you. Oh,
she's been so good. Even just to watch her, I couldn't believe that I was in her presence for one, but just to watch her in her element. She's just so natural, and I've just taken so much inspiration from seeing how she is, both on and off the camera. She's the same person. It's incredible to me. She's just so natural.
That's the key to it. Stephen, tell us about some of the other people that are in the documentary.
Yeah, so there's a wide range of stories that we've told in this series. So you guys would be familiar with Ellen Franklin, who worked for Oz Runways. Mm-hmm. So Ellen came up and did her instructor rating with us. Also, we've got a young girl by the name of Maddie, and Maddie is only 17 years of age at the time of the filming of the series, and so she's had her own journey of overcoming some difficult family situations. And then we've got Zara, who is just amazing. So we're talking about an Afghan refugee who fled Afghanistan with the fall of Kabul because she was in the Afghan Air Force. And so they were rounding up people and shooting them. And so she fled to Australia, had to teach herself English when she got here, and decided that she wanted to learn to fly, and moved her entire life from Melbourne or Adelaide, where she was staying, to Brisbane so that she could pursue her dream of flying.
That is amazing. What a story that would be to tell. How did you cast out and attract such a wide range of really, really interesting people to put on this show?
Yeah, well, it started with Katrina and telling Katrina's story, and then it moved on to getting Erin involved and following her journey into instructing. And then there was another girl by the name of Danny who is from Canberra, and so we started off with 3. And then it sort of grew to 4 with Alan, and then 5, and then it grew to 8. And it just got to the point where it was becoming so big. We needed help to help us to be able to structure the series and the stories and to get some additional funding. And so we were able to do that with the help of Screen Australia through, which is what Bridget organised. So we've had some pretty great sponsors and supporters and funders who have helped to bring this story to light.
I'll tell you what, it's a wonderful story. We're talking about the Touch the Sky documentary. We're here with Stephen Limkin and Erin Douglas. Stick with us, folks. This is Playing Crazy Down Under. We'll be right back after this.
Keeping up to date with the latest news is a huge part of our daily lives. Now you can have news on demand with the Australian Independent Radio News app. News and sport in your pocket whenever you want it. Wherever you are in the world, if you call Australia home, you can stay in touch with the Air News app. Download it now for news on the go.
This is Air News.
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 Australian Independent Radio News.
Hi, I'm Dave Homewood from the Wings Over New Zealand show, New Zealand's own aviation podcast series, where we feature the stories of Kiwi pilots, warbird restorers, Air Force veterans, home builders, historians, authors, modelers, stories from aviation museums and associations, airshow reports, and much, much more. The Wings Over New Zealand show loves to bring you the stories of Kiwis who've made their mark on aviation. So find the Wings Over New Zealand show online. Find more about it on the world-famous Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum and like us on Facebook.
I'm Matt Hall.
Hi, I'm Matt Hall.
I'm Matt Hall.
No, I'm Matt Hall.
No, I'm Matt Hall.
Everyone wants to be Australia's champion Red Bull air race pilot, and now you can own a piece of Matt Hall memorabilia. Polos, t-shirts and caps for all shapes and sizes can be found at matthallracing.com. Just go to the online store and you too can be in the loop.
Hello, I'm Matt Hall.
You're listening to Playing Crazy Down Under, where we talk aviation. Thanks very much for joining us. Our guests this week is Erin Douglas and Stephen Limkin from Touch the Sky, a new online documentary series, and it's focusing on the journey of women into aviation. Guys, I wonder, women's participation in aviation has traditionally been quite low as a percentage. Why do we think that is, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, I think that if you look historically, I don't know why it actually just became a male-dominated industry. If you go back to the very early days of aviation, the Amelia Earharts of aviation, she had this amazing vision of seeing aviation as a vehicle that was going to empower women moving forward into the future, not only in terms of transportation, but also in terms of being engineers, being pilots. And yet, if we look at from that time to now, not a lot's actually changed.
And hence, of course, the documentary, and we talked a bit before about storytelling. I mean, we really need to see a lot more of this storytelling going on. It's certainly not an industry that only men can participate in. To me, like you say, it's a bizarre thing. Anybody can do this if they have the drive to do it. Absolutely.
And we're talking about, like women make up 51% of the population, yet they only make up 5% of pilots. So we've got to do something to change the stats.
Yeah, no, exact. And when you look at the WAFs back in World War II on both the US and the UK, flying fighters, flying bombers. I remember one of the stories, I think it was about the B-29, where the male pilots were like, oh, we don't trust it, we don't see it. And so they started delivering a whole lot of them with female crews. And the male pilots went, well, shoot, I guess we've got to fly them. And what they found was that the ladies were following the checklists and the guys were too macho and didn't need this checklist crap and were causing problems. And once they got checklists drilled into the guys by the ladies flying them and having no problems, and the guys obviously doing something wrong once they realized that. So we've lost a lot, I think, when everyone came back from the war. And all the GIs and all the military came back, and the ladies who were doing a lot of work in industry and doing a lot of work in aviation, well, they had to get out of the way so the guys could have the jobs. And I think that set a lot of that progress back that Amelia Earhart was looking at pre-war and what we saw during the war. But it's great to see us clawing it back. But I'm going to step sideways a bit and go, Erin, in this show, you've been talking about conquering fears, building up knowledge, building awareness and so on. How did you go when Stephen came to you and said, oh, we're going to do a documentary about you? Was it a no get away moment?
I think initially it was a hell yeah. And then as soon as I found out, that I was going to have to be filmed all the time, all of these fears came out. I'm not that good on camera, just quietly. So I think, yeah, it was terrifying. I think it was a hell yeah and then a hell no. And that just continued the whole way through.
Oscillating back and forth.
Very much.
I think too, like a lot of the time we focus on career, but of course, Erin, you've gone through the RA-Aus scheme. We've talked a lot about RA-Aus here. Can you talk about the process of going through that and why RA-Aus? Why did you choose that path?
To be honest, I didn't really know another path. It was sort of what my husband and I learned to fly at the same time, so it was what we fell into and it was all we knew at the start. We had no prior knowledge of the aviation world, so we fell into it and then loved it. I love recreational aviation. I think it's brilliant. I think it brings back such a fun vibe. I think it's absolutely necessary for aviation. I just love it for the fun of it.
Because what I'm talking about here is also not only people looking at it from a career path, but I mean, there's plenty of people that just want to come in and have fun flying. I myself, I had great ambitions many years ago when I was young to be an airline pilot. Life went in a different direction, but on the times when I do go flying now, I just want to go flying for fun, and I think that's a message. I think particularly that RA-Aus is probably uniquely able to put out there.
Absolutely. What I tell people if they come to me and say, where should I start? I say, well, start in recreational aviation. Fly for fun, fly for the joy of it. It's accessible for people of all ages. I think that's the key for me. That's the key point. It's accessible. That's what I love about it.
And tell us about the location that you're in up there in Queensland. Of course, we're down here in chilly old Melbourne where you can't always fly because, people seem to make fun of our weather, but that's never the case in Queensland. Most Queenslanders
Good
tell me.
Good excuse for an IFR rating down here in Melbourne.
Well, Stephen, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. In Queensland, I mean, we're at Redcliffe, so we're only about 25 Ks from the CBD of Brisbane and on the north side of Brisbane. And it is just a fantastic strip to fly at. Not only that, but the weather is absolutely spectacular. We have close to 300 days a year of pure sunshine.
I'm sorry, was this your knife that you just threw into us?
However, in saying that, we also have an awful lot of crosswind as well too. So we always tell people, come and land a flight at Redcliffe and we'll teach you to be a real pilot.
Well, that is a really, seriously, that's a great core skill to have is crosswind landings. I know when I was learning in the States where I was based, I don't think we ever didn't have a crosswind. It was something you became quite adept at rather quickly.
Yep.
Yeah, and the training area is right on our doorstep. So on one side, we've got the Glasshouse Mountains, which is spectacular. The other side, we've got the ocean, Moreton Island. You've seen the iconic shots of all the rusted shipwrecks that are along those beautiful turquoise waters. So we live in and fly in a spectacular part of the country.
Yep.
Well, we had some sunshine here last week, I think, didn't we, here in Melbourne?
I think it got up to about 15 degrees the other day. It was awesome. But I mean, one thing Melbourne's got is it's got high density air.
Yeah.
We are colder. You get better engine performance, better lift than that hot high situation you guys have got. I'm just, got to find something. Right?
Agreed.
Please, I'm scrabbling here.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, Grant.
There you go, mate. There you go. It's working for me. So the obvious question is now we've, Erin, we've made a media star of you now and we've followed your journeys and you're quite active there on social media. So where to from here? Are we going to continue to keep following your adventures and your journeys as you move on through aviation?
Yeah, I think the online world is also something I kind of stumbled into. I didn't expect it to sort of blow up as it has. It started as a journal, really, just for me to keep track of my journey, and it's kind of continued that way. I'd like to keep using it as sort of a journal, to follow my way through. I don't know really. I never really set out a path for myself because I feel like when I do that, I might miss opportunities. So I just think, well, I'm going to keep all the doors open and see what happens for me. I'm just going to keep working hard and it seems to be working out.
That's outstanding. Stephen, for you, with the documentary series, I mean, where to from here? Are you going to, obviously, you've got the bug now for not only aviation, but telling people stories. I mean, you can't just leave it here with this series, surely.
Yeah, no, certainly not going to leave it here just with this series. So we're sort of hoping that we can get a second season up. So Bridget and I are now going through all the analytics and the metrics from the series to create a pitch for something with one of the broadcasters. So, I mean, the great thing is that it's been running for 9 weeks now online, and we've had over 105,000 views on our channel so far. So, which is pretty good for such a short period of time.
Yeah, it's really fantastic, and the thing I like about it is that they're not. I mean, they're short form documentaries, aren't they? They're sort of a short synopsis of each pilot's story as they go through. And I think the way you've done that is really effective. It's just enough. It catches people's attention, tells the story in a really effective way. Yeah,
and when we did that, I really wanted to incorporate the use of a psychologist to help us to sort of like look at some of the soft issues and the barriers that each girl has had to overcome. Not from a place of sort of like diagnosing them, but from a place of bringing a professional perspective to the sorts of issues that women actually encounter in getting into the industry. And Peter was absolutely fantastic.
I just think it's a wonderful thing. Erin, as a final message as we wrap the interview up here, your message to people in general, women specifically, but really anyone who wants to get into aviation and might have that, that monkey on their back like we've all got from time to time. What do you say to people?
I think the message that I really put out there is that you just have to get started. You just have to start somewhere. If it's something that you're thinking about, I would just pursue it. Reach out to someone you've seen online. Reach out to me. I have a lot of people reaching out to me to say, hey, where can I start? Reach out to someone. Just start somewhere.
Fantastic. And I suppose the other thing is that aviation is addictive. It certainly is. Once you get that taste for it, isn't it? It never gets out of your blood.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Stephen, it's a fantastic series. Thanks so much for putting it together. Tell our listeners where we can find you online.
So you can find the series online either at touchthesky.au, or you can jump onto our YouTube channel and you can just go and look up Touch the Sky on YouTube and you'll be able to find the series.
Awesome. Stephen, Erin, thanks so much for joining us here on Plane Crazy Down Under. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
And thanks to Stephen and Erin for joining us on the show. Grant, what a great story. And once again, if you want to check that out, touchthesky.au. There's lots of really short-form interviews there, and there's some really, really great stories there.
Oh, yeah, it's great. It's also good to recognise a couple of the folks who have been in there, like Ellen from Oz Runways, who's had the misfortune of coming ballooning with me, as I think I mentioned during our chat. So anyhow...
Well, she's very, very brave, Grant, and you didn't scare her to death, and she's gone on to become a flight instructor, so... There you go.
Yeah, I think she's definitely a brave person. Not only went for a balloon flight with me, but also went instructing.
Yes. Well, there you go. See, Grant, you've been a positive influence on people. You've scared them away from ballooning and into fixed-wing flying.
Thanks, mate.
Nice work, buddy.
Not that you're biased.
Well, Grant, speaking of fixed-wing flying of a different kind, well, it's not really, actually. It's rotary wing, really, isn't it, when you think about it, and drone flying. And we were at Avalon, of course, recording lots of content for Australian Defence magazine, and they've graciously let us use this content. And, Grant, the Defence Force actually is right into drone racing, as it turns out.
They certainly are. And there's actually a link with ballooning because Justin, a friend of mine who was there, we didn't interview him though, he refused. He's with the RAF and he's actually a hot air balloon pilot as well, but he's there drone racing. So he said that the young ones are doing pretty well with those reflexes. But it's a great chat with Karen Joyce, and looking forward to hearing it once again. And I'm sorry it was just me, but I am the host of the Australian Defence Magazine podcast. So, yeah, Steve didn't get a word in. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, well, I'm the producer. I'll just put that in there,
Well, you were there. You had your microphone and you were doing very professional stuff with your headset as well.
Yes. Well, you've got to look the part, Grant. Anyway, Grant, let's head back to Avalon.
Wing Commander Karen Joyce, welcome to the show.
I'm really excited to be here at the drone zone.
I know, right? It's the circus of drones in the circus tent. We've got a full race set up behind us. Can you tell us about the inspiration for this event?
Well, I guess number one, it's the biggest circus tent we can hire in Australia. So we've truly gone and got the biggest flying space we can, and we've made the biggest, fastest track that we can. Look, the inspiration came from the last air show that we did in 2019. We had a circus tent half that size, but what we found was, kids love drone racing. And for the public days at the last air show, the grandstand was packed and we had kids 5 or 6 deep at the tables. All the kids love watching the action. They love watching the pilots rebuilding their aeroplanes. They love watching the crashes. And so we went bigger this time because we want to have those conversations with the kids. What we do is everything STEM. We design aeroplanes, we build them, we solder, we code. So at the end of a race meet, everybody will go home, they'll download their videos, they'll cut a really sick video together and they'll put it on Snapchat and Instagram. These are the kind of skills that we want in defence, right? And it's not just about trying to talk to people about being a drone pilot. It's talking to them about being radio operators, about being mechanics, about being avionics technicians, about being multimedia techs. All of those skills are really applicable to defence and defence industry as well.
But so it's great for getting the kids in and getting them hooked, which is always a wonderful thing, getting them into STEM and so on. But it's not just the young kids, like 18 to 20 year olds that we're seeing here. there's some slightly more closer to my maturity and so on. They're not all young chickens, as the phrase goes, out there playing. So the people racing are from a broad spectrum of ages.
Absolutely. It's a sport for all ages, and I think that's also a real big thing about this sport, right? So we like to say that it's like a motorsport for anybody. Anybody can get into this motorsport. And I think that's really great because all you need is your goggles and your thumbs. Even people that might have physical disability or things like that, they can all get into the cockpit of an aerobatic aeroplane and feel like they're pulling Red Bull Air Race manoeuvres, right? And I think that's equally applicable from a 12-year-old who's used to their PS4 controller all the way up to a 60 or 70-year-old who's been doing model aerobatics for 50 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's a very inclusive sport.
Except in this case, you've got the goggles strapped to your head. You're seeing as if you're on the aircraft, but you're sitting in a chair. So your inner ear is saying, no, I'm not doing that roll. I'm not hitting that pylon or turning that corner.
It takes practice.
Yeah.
And you'll notice when you look at the pilots, some pilots stand, some pilots sit, some pilots kind of take a knee. There's different ways that different pilots approach their flying.
From what you've seen, of course, you're racing yourself. I imagine you're also coordinating what goes on. Yeah.
I mainly stick to the coordination. I'm a horrible pilot. I can't keep up with these guys. Look, it's like any elite sport, right? Yeah. Any person can go out into their backyard and get taught the basics of how to kick a footy.
Yep.
Anybody who knows how to drive a PS4 knows how to do the basics of taking off and flying a course. But getting this good, it's an elite sport. It takes lots of training. Yep. And what we see here is the best pilots that we've got from the Australian teams, but as well as the international teams. We've got a deep membership base of many, many pilots. We bring the top 5 or 6 to an event like this because we're racing for pride.
Yeah. It's not for prizes, it's for pride, right?
That's right.
So you just touched on international. I've seen Army and Air Force. There's a Navy. But you've also got a number of internationals here. Can you run through who else?
Yeah, sure. So don't forget our cadet team either. So our cadet team arrives today. So we've also got the younger folk of the Australian Defence Force racing with us from tomorrow onwards. But from an international perspective, we've got the UK and New Zealand. They're back. They have raced with us before at the first ever military international drone racing tournament, which we had in 2018. So they're back. And we've also got Singapore and Indonesia joining us for the first time this year. So we've got five countries.
Yep.
That's pretty exciting. It's great to see the sport at a military international sports level continue to build.
And how's the rivalry going between not just the young and the old, but also the international teams?
The rivalry is hot. So we've got the big trophy, right? Yeah. So the winning team of those 5 countries, the Military International Drone Racing Tournament champions. But we also have an Ashes trophy that Australia does count back on scores against the Brits, and we've also got a Trans-Tasman trophy. And we've got an inter-service trophy as well for the Australian team. So, yeah, the rivalry is there for sure.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned that you're the patron for this event and for the racing within the Australian Defence Force. Is that correct?
Yep.
You also said before we started rolling and interviewing about clubs, and there's clubs in all the cities, but this is the only drone racing club that is decentralised and covering the whole country.
Yeah, so the Australian Defence Force drone racing organisations are decentralised. Our pilots are all over the country, as you'd expect, for the likes of defence postings. We've got people from representing today from as far north as Townsville and Tyndall, Katherine in the Northern Territory, all the way down to Melbourne. So we are a decentralised club. We're the only decentralised club that's part of Australian FPV Drone Racing Association. All the other clubs are based on capital cities.
Okay.
But it's a really cool community. So across that organisation, there's 2,500 registered pilots, and it's really great to be part of that.
Okay, now if somebody wants to get into drone racing, who do they contact? What do they look on Google to find a club or...?
Every club runs a Facebook page, so if you are interested in finding out where drone racing is done in your capital city, just Google it, Melbourne Drone Racing, Sydney Drone Racing, you'll bring up their pages. All the clubs do beginner days, and they also run competitions, and we kind of go seasonal as well. So in the Canberra Club, for example, we do outdoor drone racing in the nice months, but for the significant part of the year where it's really cold, we go indoor and we go down to a subclass of drones called a mini whoop. They're about 3 or 4 inches big, and we do it indoors in restaurants, in museums, in all sorts of places.
Oh, wow.
So that's how you get into it. From a technology perspective, we like to recommend people to kind of ease themselves into it. So a simulator, you can download simulators and just use your PS4 controller, right? So that's a really cheap way to get into it. Make sure you know the moves and that you enjoy the sport. But then you get into the mini whoop class, so you can start buzzing your lounge rooms and your dining rooms, chasing your dog and whatnot. Once you're really comfortable with that, then you get into the race class aircraft, and that's when you'll start spending $300 on an aeroplane, and getting into the high speed stuff that we do here up to 150 kilometers an hour.
And is that scale kilometers an hour or real kilometers?
No, that's real.
Woof.
Yeah,
Okay.
They hoof around this track.
Okay.
And we designed the track so that right along the grandstand there is a low straight and a high straight, so that the audience get the full experience of the high speed and sometimes high speed crashes of the main straight.
Saw a few while we were waiting to shoot, and I'm sure we'll get them on the camera. So anything else you'd like to say while we've got you here?
So just to expand on the last point though, if any defence people want to get into our associations, we also run Navy, Army and Air Force Facebook pages, and that is absolutely the easiest way to get in touch with us. It's a great way to get involved in an Army sport or an Air Force sport. Not every soldier, not every officer, not every aviator wants to play rugby these days or play golf on their service teams. A lot of people now want to do drone racing. They want to do esports. They want to do wargaming, right? All of those associations exist. So for all of our military members that might want to do this, just reach out through our Facebook page or our email addresses on the restricted network. We'll send you a membership form and we can get you started.
Fantastic. Well, Kieran, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, mate.
Hamish Glover, welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you. How's it going?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. Now, you're a pretty speedy drone racer, I hear. You've got some speed records and all that.
Currently sitting for the Military International in second place against a New Zealand pilot, Quato.
Okay.
He's very quick.
Yeah.
So we're doing laps around this track in about 12 or 13 seconds. And there's a wide variety of range of speed here. So we've got the 12, 13 seconds and the people who are just trying to do their first lap.
People like me who go, where is it? What?
Yeah.
Okay, so what got you into drone racing?
I just started flying toy drones. So the stuff you bought on eBay in 2015, $50, $100, buy something, fly it at the park. It wasn't first person or anything. Then I had a mate at school who wanted to get into it too, and we pushed each other. We just started doing the research. I think we spent a couple of months just looking into what to buy, where to buy it from. Bought all the parts, went through a bunch more questions, figured it all out, and started flying. And that was it. And then from there, I got into racing more. So this kind of thing here, which is much more specialised than when I started flying. It's built just to go fast. And then from there, I got out of it for a bit in 2019. And I came back into it last year and joined the Army team. From there, it's just blown up. Now I'm doing this all over the place.
And it's more than the flying. It's also you've got to maintain. It's like you see the race drivers, and they've got an engineer, and then they've got a pit team. But you're it.
We are everything. Yeah. So we have to go home after this and look at what we've broken. Figure out sometimes we don't know what we've broken. Something's not flying. Pull it apart. Figure out what's going on. There's a lot of troubleshooting going on. Yeah.
So it's more than just the flying. But coming back to the flying. Okay, so like we were just talking before, your eyes are telling you're racing around this track. Your inner ear is saying, I'm sitting in a chair or standing or whatever.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get that, I'm accommodating this and I'm used to it now?
Some people it takes a while. For me, I think maybe something to do with being younger. It is easier. I pretty much was able to pick it up and I didn't feel sick or anything when I started. Some people it takes a while. Some people can only do it sitting down. Some of us can just stand up and do it just fine. Problem when you're standing up and racing is you start to lean with it sometimes and you get a bit wonky. So I've moved to sitting down now, where I used to just stand up. And you're hearing a lot of different things in your ears. So you've got commentary going on here. You've got other quads in the air. So it's not just this one, you've got 4 others in there. So sometimes you have to push out the other noise and you're trying to hear what's going on with yours. If you've broken something, you'll hear it sometimes before you see it. And if you hear someone else that's broken theirs, that's got a propeller missing or something, you sometimes can get a bit confused about what's going on. So yes, you are processing a lot of inputs at once.
So you're really locking in, and you have to total concentration, focus and all that.
Absolutely. It's weird watching the video from afterwards. You look at yourself flying and I go, wow, that was quick. But while you're in it, it feels quick, but you're processing everything, you're trying to slow it down, and you don't realize how fast it is while you're doing it.
Yeah, okay.
But at the same time, you're having to adjust the whole time to actually make it around and not crash at the pace I'm trying to go. It's pretty quick.
So let's run through the gear you're carrying, and you've clearly the goggles, the antenna, welcome to your planet, but the gear and the controller that you've got now. Let's start at the aircraft.
Yeah, sure. So this is, as I mentioned before, it's a specially designed racing drone.
Yep.
So there's a few different kinds of these you can build for different purposes. The idea of this is lightweight, but still durable, so it can handle a crash. So you've got 4 motors, 4 propellers. In here there's a flight controller that tells it all what to do, and a speed control that takes the battery power and sends it out to the motors so it can actually run them. You've also got some of the most important things in there. You've got a camera at the front and a video transmitter. So that transmits back to the goggles, so we see exactly what that camera lens there sees.
So where's the antenna for the camera?
The antenna is this little guy back here. Okay. So it's in a 3D printed mount. Yep. So that keeps it nicely in place. The camera is also in a 3D printed mount there.
Yep.
So there's tons of different ways to mount these. It just depends on what frame you've got. You can get lots of different ones out there. And it's all a personal preference kind of thing.
And then the battery tucks underneath the bottom.
Yeah, so the battery will go on there where you've got this lead here, and it plugs into there.
And the Velcro holds it in place.
Exactly,
Nice.
That's for your battery. Yeah, and then you've got a little receiver in here which goes back to the transmitter. So that's a fairly simple thing. This sends your commands to the receiver. The receiver sends it off to the flight controller, and the flight controller interprets those commands and tells the motors what to do.
And as in a normal, it looks very much like a standard RC controller with a few extra switches.
It is, yeah. So this can fly RC planes, micro quads. It can really fly anything you want, exactly.
And instead of controlling servos and an engine and all that, it's controlling 4 and the different speeds of the rotors gives you your pitch angles and everything.
That's it. Yes. So you've got your roll, your pitch, your throttle, and your yaw, and that's exactly on a quadcopter. That's translating to these movements you see. Yeah.
Cool. And now for the headgear. So you said it's transmitting video back to you. So I imagine you're not getting super high def 4K.
Yeah,
watching
that's
Netflix
right.
Kind of video.
A lot of people coming into this, they think we see high resolution, but this is an analog system here, and what we see is fairly low resolution. There's a lot of breakup often, especially in environments where there's a lot of other quads racing. Metal objects are pretty rough on video too. There's some new systems out there like a DJI and HD0. They're doing digital video where you might get a bit better quality, sometimes at the expense of latency. So the reason we've run this for a long time is no one could match the latency of this gear.
Gotcha.
We want to see exactly what that quad's doing as soon as possible. We want the lowest possible latency, and that's what analog delivered.
So like the old days of analog phones where you'd still hear what they were saying even if they sounded like a Dalek.
Yeah.
But now with digital, and you get the interruptions and total loss.
So we'll see, until there's no video left, we're still seeing something. And we can, sometimes it's pretty bad, but you learn to fly through it.
Okay, so you've got 2 antennas on the headset.
Yeah.
One is a backup or?
Kind of. So it's a diversity setup, so it'll actually pick the one that's getting the strongest feed.
Okay.
So if one antenna is weaker than the other in its reception, it'll switch to the other receiver. Okay. So in that way, it's kind of a backup. I can take one of these off and it'll work perfectly fine. But then if that antenna would have been picking up something better, I won't have that benefit.
Now for the inevitable question. You have got the front row gorgeous view seats as it smashes into something in the ground.
Yes, for sure.
Do you ever get used to that?
Yeah, I think so. You get a lot more comfortable with it. Crashing is something you really have to learn with these, because if you crash in a race and you're able to avoid actually stopping the quad, if you're able to keep flying off that crash, then you're going to be able to get up a lot quicker. If you avoid getting stuck in the grass, you're already up for a better chance, right? So you get used to bouncing off something and flipping upside down and that. You get used to quick recoveries, so I might do a quick flick of the roll stick to try and recover it and see how quickly I can get back in the air. If you're stuck on the ground, they have a thing called turtle mode, or flip over after crash, which is if you're upside down, it can reverse the motors. So that's what this here does. It keeps 2 of the motors out of the grass. If you don't have this and the grass is tall, these will not spin. They'll be in the dirt in the grass. So it keeps it out. You have 2 motors up. You flip it back over, try and take off again. Sometimes you'll see people out there who are taking ages trying to get up. It's 30 seconds on the ground, rolling around, trying to get back up. Any chance they can get to either finish a race or just get more laps in, more practice time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and how long does the race go for?
About 2 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, so a race will usually be a certain number of laps you have to complete. If it's a short track, it might be 4 or 5 laps. If it's a longer track, it might only be 2 or 3 laps, just depending. The aim is to go for about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, because our batteries will run out after that.
Good point.
Yeah, a very short battery life. That's what happens when you're drawing over 1,000 watts on high throttle.
Yep.
You're drawing a heap of power, and these little batteries, they can only sustain that for a couple of minutes.
Yep. Now, you're also Army Reserve, is my understanding,
Yes.
so you've got a day job.
Yes.
And what's your day job?
Yeah, so I've just finished studying cybersecurity and criminology for 4 years. I'm going into work in cybersecurity.
Going into that, staying in the Army Reserve and drone racing. Looks like you've got a hell of a future.
It's going to be, there's a lot going on. I'm just taking all the opportunities I get.
Yeah.
Right, don't miss out on anything. So if I can do it, if I can get to an event like this, I'll be here.
Yep. Now, the last question, have you ever been up in a real aircraft or done real aerobatics with people? Has anyone
No,
thrown you
I'd
around?
love to.
Yeah.
No, commercial airlines is as far as I've gone.
Okay.
I haven't actually been in a private plane or anything like that before.
Okay.
Done aerobatics, I'd love to.
Yeah. No,
If anyone gives me the opportunity, I'll take it, obviously.
Okay. I'm sure there'll be people around here that you can meet.
Yeah, I'll have a
Sort
chat
of
to
for you.
someone.
Yeah.
Get in a fighter jet.
Well, mate, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And thanks to Hamish and to Kieran for joining us there. And once again, of course, that did appear in the current series of the Australian Defence Magazine podcast. And we produced that one, and we'd highly recommend you get over there and listen to that. That's a great show, Grant.
Not that we're biased, and sorry that you have to put up with my dulcet tones, but I am joined by other people, so it's not just me rabbiting on.
No, that's true. No, it's a great series. We had a lot of fun making that, and it's actually really informative. So, australiandefence.com.au. Okay, enough shameless plugs for that, Grant. And I tell you what, he wasn't kidding when he said that was the biggest circus tent around. That was massive, and there was a lot of noise in there, a lot of drones buzzing around.
And a lot of people too, especially on the weekend, that got really packed. A lot of people enjoying watching drones racing around and thumping into the ground and occasionally winning.
I tell you what, that actually is a real skill. I've said it before on previous times we've talked about drones. The idea of flying it while it's moving away from you is one thing, but having to reverse all those control inputs, that takes some concentration, I think, when it's coming back towards you.
Oh, it's like any remote control aircraft like that. But don't forget, these guys were actually doing first-person view. So they were standing, or more likely sitting, and watching through the eyes of their drone. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, great stuff. And as they mentioned there in the interview, it's all about STEM and all about it's actually a really, really clever way to engage young people and get them involved in aviation, and thinking about studying the relevant subjects in high school really, and moving on into science, technology, maths, all that sort of stuff. All that stuff that I was terrible at. Granted, it comes. It's a wonder I ever learned to fly at all. Really.
Hey, it's just proof you don't have to be a STEM god to be able to learn to fly. I scraped through on STEM. But hey, I still fly as well.
And of course, as Erin mentioned in the interview at the start there, I mean, if you're looking at recreational aviation or going through the GA path or whatever, you don't just have to look at it for a career. You can also look at it just to do for fun. And flying is fun. If you're listening to this show and you've actually never partaken of flight and never got behind the controls of a light aircraft, it is fun. And once you get into it, even as Erin talked about there, getting over some fears of flights and fears of heights, once you get into it and it gets into your blood, take it from Grant and myself, it never gets out of your blood.
But it's well worth doing. Go out and do a trial introductory flight, see what it's like. But also, you don't have to be in an aircraft. You can be flying your simulator, you can be flying your drone, and or a balloon or a glider, parachuting, and doing engineering on the ground, keeping the aircraft flying. There's all sorts of opportunities.
That is very true. Well, time is against us, Grant. It's probably time we looked at wrapping the show up.
Oh, it certainly is, mate. Otherwise, we're going to drone on some more. I know. Dad joke.
Dad joke. We should put dad joke warnings in there. Anyhow, folks, if you want to get in contact with us, we'd love to hear from you at contact@planecrazydownunder.com. Well, speaking of flying, as we wrap this episode up, Grant, I'm off to Thailand this week, so I'll be flying in a big metal mailing tube.
It could be carbon fibre mailing tube, but you'll be self-loading freight either way.
I don't mind being self-loading freight, and hopefully the in-flight catering will be wonderful. But anyhow, folks, until we talk to you again, Steve Fisher, on behalf of Grant McHerron, wishing you very safe flying, folks, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Find show notes for this episode, along with our contact details and a full back catalogue of shows, at planecrazydownunder.com. Drop us a line anytime with feedback, story suggestions or advertising inquiries. We'd love to hear from you. Title music is You Name It by Brian Simpson. Plane Crazy Down Under is a Southern Skies media production.